a trans woman walks into a room pretending to be a woman, who's the first people in that room who go, honey, not pulling it off. You're just not pulling it off. The women know what femininity is. And they don't mean to, they're not being judgmental. They're just saying like, yeah, no, you're not one of us. And that is a diminishment of the wonder and the protection and the power of the feminine. And men need to step forward and say, hey, we need to protect women. I'm going to protect my wife. I'm going to protect my daughters from this intrusion into their life. And that's what men do. And women, they need that protection, not because they're weak, but because they deserve it.
There are some guests who are 1-episode interviews, and there are some guests who are 2-episode interviews.
Because we love them so much.
And Glenn Stanton is a 2-episode interview kind of guy.
Yes.
And I guess by elevating Glenn, I just tore down all of our 1-episode guests.
Good job. Good job, Kunkel.
But you know what? They're in the past. They're in the past. We had a fantastic conversation with Glenn Stanton. Glenn Stanton is the director of Global Family Formation Studies at Focus on the Family, hits important subjects like gender, sexuality, marriage, has written some really good books. The book that we've been talking about, that we talked about on the first interview, was Secure Daughters, Confident Sons, How Parents Guide Their Children into Authentic Masculinity and Femininity. Glenn, welcome back to the MAVEN Parent Podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be back with you guys. We had so much fun the first time.
That's right. And we talked a lot about boys, focused on boys and masculinity. In this episode, we want to focus on the girls now. But by way of introduction, there's I think some kind of opening questions we want to hit on before we really dive deep into the girls. And I think these are, especially given our cultural moment, the challenges of talking about gender.
You're not even supposed to talk about that there's actual differences.
Actually, what we're doing is out of bounds.
Is triggering.
To talk about the differences is seen as a bad thing. To talk about how one gender tends toward certain behaviors. It's almost like that is by definition putting that gender down. It's insulting that gender when we talk about that. So help us to, I guess, frame this a little bit at the beginning of this conversation. How do we talk about God's design for men and women without, belittling the other? Is it by definition belittling? How do we talk about this issue of gender differences, the way God is maybe wired us in helpful ways?
It's a great question. And I think there's something very sinister to that thing of us saying, well, to say men and women are different is to say one is better than the other, because we don't do that in any other area of life. If I say sushi is different than Italian food, nobody says, why do you think sushi's better? Or why do you think Italian food is less? Or I think Chevrolets are better than Fords. I mean, I just do. They're just better, or, they're different. But in the male and female thing, we have this tension that has been created by a very secular culture to say that any distinctions and any differences between male and female are put downs. And you think about this, the irony of feminism. G.K. Chesterton, he said, the pursuit of feminism is not to be feminine in any way. That you think about that. Feminism is women should get out there and work hard. They should compete with the men sexually. They should cut off their reproductive ability. It's like dropping all the things that make femininity and womanhood so powerful and influential in the world. They want to just neuter all of that stuff. And so we need to be able to celebrate the differences. And for us to say that a man is very different than a woman and a woman is very different than a man is not a put down, it's an empowerment. It's a praise of those differences and being able to understand those differences.
Yeah, and I think this is where we as Christians need to realize and understand that our Christian worldview it gives us such an advantage over the world, and allows. I'm thinking about kind of the feminism, the negative sense of
Yeah.
feminism that's pushed wanting to erase gender differences and gender distinctives, and maybe sometimes even out of a good motivation, wanting to help help the world embrace the fact that men and women share this equal value or worth.
Mm-hmm.
But in a view that's secular, right? That's stripped of it, of Christianity, you lose the intellectual resources to be able
Yeah.
to say, "Hey, these two distinct, very different creatures are also equal." And so what you have to do is you have to kind of strip them down to, the whatever the very basics are, or try to erase those distinctions so that you're not saying one is better than the other. But this is where Christianity is far superior and says, hey, you've got two human beings, both made in the image of God. That's where their value lies. And yet at the same time, acknowledging these beautiful, very different things about them, the distinctions, the differences that are radically different in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But we can also say, hey, both are noble creatures. Both are filled with dignity. And
Yeah, and I would say, especially with modern feminism and the move towards there's no differences, and this kind of, oh, women can do anything men can do kind of just ridiculousness, is that it actually diminishes women because men become the standard. And
Yeah.
now it's, oh, we're not different at all. So we'll all just measure up against each other. And it becomes who's the most powerful and
Yeah.
who's the strongest. And this is what we see happening, for example, in sports. Oh, there's no biological difference. And so if a boy says he's a girl now, then he can compete with the girls. And then we'll just pretend like there's no biological advantage to boys and what happens in puberty with boys. And
Yeah.
so it ends up being who ends up losing when now we don't appreciate the differences, but now we're competing with each other and it becomes this power struggle. Well, oftentimes the men will win because they're bigger, stronger, they'll compete more, they'll take way more risks. And so they end up winning. And this is the sad part of modern day feminism that is just, like you said, Glenn, it just strips the women of everything that's unique.
Yeah.
And I would say beautiful about our design.
And powerful.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you're talking about the guys in women's sports, and you can have girls on those teams that they can be as broadly minded as they possibly can be and as liberally oriented as they possibly can be. But every one of those girls in that playing field will think, seriously, you want me to compete against that? And they feel this sense of violation and this command from culture that no, you're not supposed to seek justice for the female in that because that's transphobic. I mean, that is one of the most radical violations against the feminine. Another thing real quick on this is like a trans woman walks into a room pretending to be a woman. Who's the first people in that room who go, honey, not pulling it off. You're just not pulling it off. The women know what femininity is. And they don't mean to, they're not being judgmental. They're just saying like, yeah, no, you're not one of us. And that is a diminishment of the wonder and the protection and the power of the feminine. And men need to step forward and say, hey, we need to protect women. I'm going to protect my wife. I'm going to protect my daughters from this intrusion into their life. And that's what men do. And women, they need that protection, not because they're weak, but because they deserve it.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we talk about the differences between men and women, God's design, unique design for each, one of the things you talk about in the book is being careful to make this distinction between tendencies and totalities. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah. So I haven't been doing it as much now, but I used to debate these issues of gender difference on college campuses. And, you'll talk about some of the generalities. Like, for instance, women give birth. You'll have a woman, a student who's like, well, I've never given birth. Are you saying I'm not a woman? And, you want to just be silly with them and go, yeah, I'm saying you're not a woman. Like, don't be ridiculous. The point is not that all women do this or all men do this, but men tend to do this. Women tend to do this. Women are the ones that tend to give birth to the next generation of humanity. Men are the ones that tend to impregnate women. I mean, that's just like a biological fact, right? Do all men do that? No. Do all women bring forth life? No. But it is the general rule that men tend to do this and women tend to do that. Yes, you're going to find exceptions to these things, but the exceptions really do prove the rule because they are exceptions. When we see exceptions, the person bringing that caveat to me, they're recognizing that what they're presenting is an exception to it. So they're proving my rule in that way. And that's very important.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would
go
add
ahead,
to that is we do need to understand, like, it's so funny, me here at work, I do a lot of guy things, but I am not a big team sports guy. And they'll be talking about team sports at work. And I feel like a woman, like, I have no idea what you guys are talking about, but I'm secure enough in myself, like, not to be bothered by that. And my sports buddies, like, they'll give me a hard time. Football, that's the long oblong ball, Glenn. That's what we're talking about. So that doesn't take anything away from my masculinity. It's just that there's not always an absolute one-to-one correlation that all men do this and all women do this. But at the same time, we see behaviors that we say universally, humanly, that's female behavior, that's male behavior.
Yeah, and that's where a woman who is into football and can, they've got their team, they know the stats, they watch the game every weekend, also need to understand that and not take offense to what you said, like, I feel like a woman.
Right, exactly.
Right, because we are, of course, we're so conditioned in our, I think, our culture to take offense at everything. But it's really important for us to think about these tendencies that help us understand the nature of masculinity and femininity, and realize that when there are going to be individuals who don't fit some of those tendencies as well as others, but there's still tendencies and there's still generalizations we can make that are helpful to talk about. Even though, and that when you make a generalization, that's not the same thing as reducing it to a stereotype.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because Glenn says that comment, I feel like a woman I think the defensive response is because there's the assumption that, Glenn, you're saying that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's the bad, so we just go to, oh, well, he's saying it to demean women, or he's saying because to be a woman would be to be bad. No, you're saying it because in general, women are not huge fans of competitive sports like this, where they're talking in the office with the guys. Now, of course, we all know exceptions to that, but that's exceptions to American culture things too.
Right.
These tendencies go beyond culture and time, but we assume it's negative. And that's really the point, is we haven't learned, even in the church, to appreciate the differences and to be okay when someone points them out, and to not assume it's a negative thing. Oftentimes, because, maybe it's because we have been teased and it's meant to be negative, but it doesn't mean that it's always that way, or that we can't talk about it in a healthy way, and it's not putting the other sex down.
Right. Differences are virtues.
Mhm.
What's the uniqueness and the goodness between a fork and a spoon? A fork does what a fork does. A spoon does what a spoon does.
Mhm.
This electricity that we're using to communicate with one another, it's alternating current, and like
Mhm.
one does one thing and one does another thing. And we can't say, well, let's fight for equality. If we fought for equality in the sense of sameness, these things wouldn't work. And so we need to realize that there is a very profound feminine power in humanity, and it is found in her femininity, just like there's a profound masculine power that's found in the essence of masculinity. And we need to
Mhm.
learn. We need to learn as Christians, as a church, to really celebrate those things, because it was our Lord who created that, and he created
Mhm.
it in goodness and in his own pleasure.
Yeah, you just said differences are a virtue. I think that in this cultural moment
Mhm.
should be a mantra of our Christian
Mhm.
families. This should be something that we say to our boys and our girls. Hey, differences are a virtue. This is a
Mhm.
good thing. This is by
Mhm.
God's design. And so let's talk about some of those differences. We kind of laid out, hey, here's a vision of what makes a good man. And you do go into a lot more detail in the book, but uh, give us some of those specific ways in which God has made women in good ways, some of the unique things, some of these tendencies that we see in female nature. What
Yeah.
is a good woman?
Yeah, let me start with that. And what we talked about last time in the male nature, that the male physicality is outward facing. The female physicality is inward. She draws into herself and she takes unto herself, and that's why girls, like young little girls, like they're so relationally oriented. I
Mhm.
was here. Here's just a funny example. I think when I was writing part of this book, this is a number of years ago, I'm in Amsterdam. And in Amsterdam, I'm sitting in this little cafe. And in Amsterdam, there's a gazillion bikes. Everybody rides bikes. And I'm watching the guys ride bikes. And the guys are like getting from point A to point B. The girls, and this is in Amsterdam, the girls are all riding together talking. They're making it a relational experience. And that's the thing, is girls are what I call, first of all, confidently enticing. They draw into themselves. And every one of us exists because a person called our mother drew something into herself,
Mhm.
her husband, and created us. And women are that way. They watch out for one another. They
Mhm.
protect one another. They can be catty sometimes, but they're catty out of a relational nature that kind of goes bad, if you will. But women are confidently enticing, and
Mhm.
women seek intimacy over action. The relationship is very, very important for them. For the young man, doing is what it's all about, getting it done. But for the woman, relating, those women riding their bikes in Amsterdam, yeah, they got to
Mhm.
get from point A to point B, but they can. Why don't we make it an experience while we're doing this and interact with one another? I see that around work. People like go around our building and walk during the day. The women will be on their phones talking to somebody, or they'll be in little groups talking with one another. Um, Women are also wisely receptive. They they're very discerning. Women tend to be more discerning than men. Um, and they're very discerning about who they're friends with, who they draw into themselves. Women who choose poorly, we can kind of think guys who choose poorly, we just call them dumb. women who choose poorly, we say, that they're not as discerning as they should be.
Mm.
But women, yeah, women draw to themselves and they seek to care for others, to protect. Men protect, but women protect in a different sort of way. They nurture. Men are not as nurturing. Women are nurturing and they're modest. Um,
Mm.
they bring a modesty to the human experience. And I'll end with this too. I say women create civilization because they have higher expectations. I explain that
Mm.
this way. The napkin and the tablecloth
Mm.
exist because of the feminine nature. A man would never invent a napkin. He's like, I got a
Mhm.
sleeve, I got an elbow here, I'm good. But women are like, maybe we could do this a little bit better. Maybe we could have finer things. The phrase, we don't have nice things because of you, that's a woman's statement. And it's a good statement because they yearn for something to be better. And the
Mhm.
man goes out to win the heart of the woman and makes those things better. But yeah, the feminine nature calls us up into something, a better life and a more relational life and a more tied together life. And that's
Mm.
good.
So the challenge as we lay out the distinctions and the differences is recognizing that these things are good,
Mhm.
because you just see the differences between men and women, and you see the potential for conflict. In fact, I was just thinking about when we were doing prep for this interview, we got into a little tiff,
That was
and
your fault, though.
yeah, I knew you were going
Okay,
to say
let's
that.
hear it.
Let's do therapy with Glenn. He'll
Well,
help us figure this out.
I mean, just being reminded that women seek intimacy of action
Overaction.
over just getting the job done, right? And men more seek results. And so I
Mhm.
wanted to get this interview done, or I wanted to get the prep done and get questions done. And so I'm a little more gruff, if you will. Gruff is
If
the
you
nice word.
will.
A little more aggressive in pushing for this.
Yes.
And I said something in and not in a not a very sensitive way. I'm trying to just lighten it. Okay, I was rude. Okay. I was rude
I don't
in
believe
saying
that.
it. But
It's
I'm
hard
willing to
believe.
move beyond. I'm like, hey, let's, even if we contend a little bit, all right, let's just get the job done. Let's get this interview prepped. Let's
Mhm.
go. Whereas that kind of threw you off, that I was rude. And then that disrupted you because you're interested also in the intimacy of action and the relational connection.
Mhm.
And that's where I then had to, I kind of recognized you were thrown off and upset. And I had to step back, and then I actually had to apologize to you.
Mm.
Just what, that was an hour ago. I apologized and had to say I was sorry, but I could have just been frustrated, like, oh gosh, she has to, make this a thing, and why can't we just move past this quickly? And I can do that more easily as a guy, but appreciating also that was a good thing, and it helps to shave off the rough edges on me. And I can't just get away with being rude and excusing my rudeness and my sharpness and that kind of thing. And so that's just
Mhm.
part of the challenge, isn't of recognizing the goodness.
Yeah, see, I mean, you're demonstrating the differences between husband and wife, mother and father. And, many times our kids observe that and they are learning. They don't know that they're intentionally learning, but they're learning dad's got his way, mom's got her way. And they're kind of like working it out. And sometimes those ways, like you said, create clashes because they're different ways of doing things. And that's the thing is like dads want to get it done. I think about that with shopping. For shopping, for a man, it's a task. Go in, you know what you want, get it, get out. For the
Mhm.
woman, she's browsing. It's an experience kind of thing. And so boys and girls both need to be able to see those differences and even see how those differences create clashes, but in a humility or a love and a tenderness, you work those things out and you're kind to one another and you're forgiving to one another when those clashes happen. And then, when the kids grow up, they're like, oh, yeah, that's why my dad was like this, because I'm the same way. And I'm seeing these same kind of conflicts. And these happen generation after generation after generation because that's humanity. That's what it means to be human.
Parents of teens, summer is a huge opportunity. It's an opportunity because they get a break from the regular rhythms of life, like school and other obligations, and they have some free time. So be intentional with that free time and get your students some really good worldview training.
Don't miss your opportunity this summer to send your kids to Summit Ministries student conferences. In fact, if you use the code MAVEN25, you'll save $300 off a Summit student conference this summer. Go to summit.org/Maven to register your student. All right, I want to ask you about one thing in your book, because I think this is going to be, in our cultural moment, controversial, but you talk about women desiring equity and submission.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, unpack that for our audience.
Yeah. That's a big thing. Okay, so when I was writing this book, and I have the pleasure at Focus, I talked to a lot of journalists and a lot of secular journalists. And I imagine, the journalist from like The Atlantic that I'm talking to on the phone. She's a powerful woman. She is successful in her career. She's incredibly well educated. I work with academics as well, and you're talking to this woman and she's a PhD anthropologist and she's rocking the world in her career. And a lot of these professionals that I was talking to while I was writing the book, I said, hey, I'm researching a book and I have a question. Answer this or respond to this. A woman is looking for somebody to protect and take care of her. True or false? And I anticipated the more feminist type women would react so negatively to that. But they would go, you know what? That's exactly what we're looking for. And it's not because they're weak. It's not because they're not capable. It's because the feminine nature is to lean into a man and to be, again, protected by a man, to be comforted by a man, to be covered by a man. We talk about, in the Christian community, like a man covers the woman and we think, oh, the sweet little woman who can't do it for herself. No, it's a sense of protection. And what do you do? What do you protect? You protect things that are precious. You protect things that are valuable. You protect things that are worth protecting. And so what the woman is saying is she's saying, I'm worthy of that. I want that. I need that. And it is interesting that you see women like this. They're out in the world. I mean, from all intents and purposes, they don't need a man. They have a successful career. They're earning money. They have reputation. They have prestige. But when they go home at night by themselves, they wish they had a good man, strong man, a confident man, a masculine man that they can lean into and feel like they're being covered by that man. And our crazy gender politics mix all that up. But when you try to listen to the quietness of the female heart, they'll be really quite honest with you about that. And it's a remarkable thing.
Yeah, and I think this is again where modern feminism tells us women that desire that you're talking about is a weakness in us and it's a bad thing. And so we're supposed to push it off and we're supposed to have this tough exterior that, oh, I don't need anyone else, when in reality, men and women need each other.
Yeah.
And so culture-wise, you can see it's just this from the secular view, oh, that means you're weak and you should fight against that, women, that desire for that. And then I think in the church sometimes too, I mean, sadly, I've heard that kind of desire, or even this, that the man covers, you said. And I loved how you described that, Glenn, that's because, again, of some kind of weakness in women. Like we're more apt to sin or deception or whatever it is. And so
Right.
it's like we need men because there's something wrong with us. And so even that men do that comes out of that something's wrong with us. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's, I mean, that's a satanic kind of thing, is to take our strengths and to turn them into weaknesses, to say that gifts that God gave us are something that we need to shun and bury and not appreciate. Just like the man who comes along and protects the woman, his wife, and the daughters that he loves. And if he asserts himself, oh, that's toxic masculinity. Like, no, that's him stepping up and loving and caring and protecting the people that he loves most. And the woman finding a comfort in that. You know what? She can take the trash out. She can cut the grass. She can technically change the oil in the car and do all that stuff. But to have somebody who comes in and does it for her so that she doesn't have to worry about those things, she finds a comfort in that. She finds a rest in that. And she finds a sense of dignity and significance in that. And that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got a chapter on what girls really need. Now, there's too much to unpack, in the remaining time of our interview here, but give us an overview on this. Moms and dads are listening, pastors are listening. What in kind of a more general sense do we need to think about in terms of the needs of our girls as we raise them?
Well, first to see them as girls and to think about what they need. But I mean, even I say this, I'm like a little hesitant to even say this because it's just not what we say in society today. But dads, your little girls need to know that they have your heart and that they are beautiful. And do not highlight necessarily like what they're wearing. I remember with my little girls, I thought they were most beautiful when they were just like wearing jeans and an Old Navy t-shirt and their Converse tennis shoes. I'm like, oh, you look so beautiful today. They're like, my hair's not even fixed. And I'm like, no, it's you that looks beautiful. You are amazing. And to help them see that, that, you know what, you're not beautiful because of the clothes that you're wearing or the hair or how much time went into fixing yourself up. Women get into that, but men can say like, no, like I just see a real genuine beauty in you. And it's not just because you're my daughter, or it's not just because you're my wife. Like I see this in you. And so to be able to call that out, but then also to be able to call out the confidence in them. And to say, I see you as brilliant. I see you as smart. I saw you arguing with somebody and you made a little turn in your argument and like you won the argument there because you're smart, you're brilliant, and you're a brilliant girl. Link those two things together, or you're strong. Not strong in like a guy way, but you're strong in, again, look how you turned that argument, or look how you changed that situation, or look how you came to the aid of somebody else. I like your strength. I like your strength. And that's a feminine strength that is worthwhile. The other is a modesty. We always have to recognize that males and females are both modest, but modesty is a uniquely feminine trait, and we need to protect the modesty of our girls. And that's why the travesty of opening girls' changing rooms and locker rooms to guys who think they're girls is like really literally demonic. because it makes the woman say your inborn sense of modesty is silly and ridiculous, and we are not going to honor that, and we need to honor that.
Yeah, and women understand that. I'm thinking about, and I know, Glenn, I've heard you talk about J.K. Rowling and how she's been so now outspoken about the transgender stuff. And she's talked about how she's evolved in her thinking on this. Part of it is because of the abuse she experienced in her first marriage. But when she was all for, okay, yeah, people do whatever you want. But when they started allowing men into women's spaces, what J.K. Rowling started to feel is what every woman hearing my voice knows is we realize, that is so vulnerable. That is a vulnerable place for us.
Yeah.
And for J.K. Rowling, she says, that's it. I don't want that. And that's exactly what you're talking about, and why men and women need to speak out against this, but that the modesty, the vulnerability that we feel, every woman knows what you're talking about, and it makes complete sense to us.
And it's interesting bringing up J.K. Rowling. I mean, if we remember, what was it that triggered her, that set her off? And it was a World Health Organization or some health organization put out this thing, and it referred to people who menstruate. And she's like, people who menstruate, there used to be a word for that. Somebody help me. And what she was reacting to is, do not take my unique femininity away from her. And what's ironic about that is she was boss masculine in that, but she did it in a feminine way. She's like, listen, it's done. I'm not taking crap from anybody. Do not take my femininity away from me. And there are a lot of men who can learn a lesson from her, that they should have stood up and started speaking out on behalf of women. But that's what we're seeing. And that's the reaction to this erasure. It's an erasure of the feminine. It's an erasure of womanhood today that we so need to fight against.
So what do you say to moms? We hit on dads a little bit,
and
what girls, need from dads. What do girls need from their moms?
I hesitate here not because it's controversial or difficult, but we need to understand that femininity is a different quality than masculinity. And it has to do with this. I mean, you ask what girls need from their moms. They don't really need a whole lot, because they have, and I say that with a caveat, I'm going to come back. They do need some stuff, but the girl, the young girl has an onboard femininity growing within her. When a little girl gets her first period, she's like, I know what I'm about. And it's not just, making babies and things like that, but there's something that happens within her, and her femininity, her womanhood is born within her. Men don't have that. Boys don't have that. Boys need to be given masculinity by their dads. Girls don't need to be given femininity by their moms like boys need to get it from their dads. But what girls do need from their moms is just the example. Your body is naturally blooming into a beautiful woman. Let me tell you how women care for themselves, how they carry themselves, how they prepare for themselves. She doesn't have to have her femininity given to her, but she does have to learn how to wear it, how to present it, how to protect it, right? And she does that from mom, but dad does it too. Dad, I remember my little girls, I'll be blunt, you're trying to wake up your little girls in the morning, and maybe you'll get in bed with them and you'll put your arms around them. And I remember literally thinking oh, Glenn, you can't do that anymore. You know, your little girl, she's turning into a woman and you can't just snuggle with her and wrestle with her. You have to honor her femininity. And I remember thinking of that as a dad, like, oh, yes, she's different now. And so dads are sending that message that, you know, my dear daughter, you have a gift. Your femininity is a gift that I need to honor and everybody around you needs to honor, and you need to honor it as well. And you honor it by presenting it well, and holding it well and carrying it well to the world. And that's a wonderful, beautiful gift to the world that all of us are able to give. I think one of the most powerful things about raising daughters is helping them grow up to be strong, confident women who know who they are and never, never, ever apologize for their femininity and their womanhood.
Well said. Well, Glenn, we could keep talking to you, and audience, his book is, like I said in the first podcast, it's just one of the main books I recommend for parents anytime we're talking about boys and girls and how they're different and how to appreciate them. But thank you for your book, Secure Daughters, Confident Sons. Thank you for your ministry work at Focus on the Family, for how you help equip the church, especially, Glenn, for this time and place where these conversations about gender and sex and boys and girls and is there really differences, you are a bold, courageous voice for truth that the culture needs and the church needs too. So thank you so much for being with us for this time, for highlighting in such a good, godly way his good design for boys and girls. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed every moment of it. You guys are fun.
Well, the book is Secure Daughters, Confident Sons, and our listeners, you need to go online right now, purchase it now, or we just ask that you'd never listen to the podcast again. That's how serious we are about this, all right? Thanks, Glenn. MAVEN exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. Through your generous financial partnership with MAVEN, you are having an impact on the lives of students and families across the country. To become a monthly partner, visit maventruth.com and click on the donate button.